Oh, okay. Yep.
Hello.
Holla. Okay.
Welcome to Get Justice with Scott Elliott Smith and Michael Morris. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Scott. It's fantastic to be back here with you.
All right, let's talk about something that is basic to our listeners. Today, let's talk about the civil justice system. Do you know what that is, Michael?
I don't know it as well as you know it, but I've heard of it. I have not had to be part of that, so I don't think it's as common as you're kind of making it. Why don't you kind of explain?
Well, let's parse it out a bit. There's a system of justice in this country based on our democratic foundation, including the Constitution. Generally speaking, our system is divided into criminal and civil. Criminal is when someone does something and violates a statute where the state, city, or county will bring a cause of action by way of a ticket or an indictment. You're driving down the road, you run a stop sign, you hit somebody, and you're drunk. Well, chances are the police are going to come and they're going to give you a ticket, or they may take you to jail. You may get indicted if you killed somebody. On that side of the fence is the criminal aspect. On that side of the fence, Michael, you will face the prosecutor, you will have to get a defense attorney, and what is at risk is you going to jail, you getting fined, or other similar type of remedy, maybe even restitution when you got to pay a little money to the person that you injured, but not necessarily to make you whole. The criminal system is the system designed for the state to bring an action to protect all of us from criminals or traffic offenders. That's not what we do at my law office. What we do is the civil side. And the civil side, on that same example, is you would not come to me. Your insurance company would hire a lawyer for you to defend you in what you did, but the person that you hit would come to me. Now, the civil justice system remedies is limited to almost strictly monetary compensation. It's not perfect, but it's the best in the world, because instead of us taking the law in our own hands, instead of that person who you struck coming after you after they get out of the hospital, or their family coming after you for what you did, our system is designed to protect all of us in a civil society. So we don't do an eye for an eye. So we all can live under the same umbrella of rules everyone is to follow. And if you don't follow those rules and you needlessly endanger somebody, the civil system gives you an avenue to recover monetary benefits to attempt to make you whole again. Now, people say, well, money can't get me back my broken leg. The doctor did the best he can, but it still hurts. Well, in the law, in the civil system, because we haven't figured out a better way, that means the person who caused it, in your instance, your insurance company will need to pay to make that person whole. Not only their medical bills and lost wages, but also for the fact you can't walk, or that person can't walk as well. And that's got to be for the rest of their life if it's a permanent injury. That's why verdicts get high. That's why verdicts come out in hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, because of what people do. It's the only way we can remain civil with each other, not kill each other when something bad like that happens.
But there can still be hurt feelings over that one way or another. If somebody has to pay out, in your trucking case, that the company had to shell out, what was the verdict? Was almost $11 million.
My verdict last June in that trucking collision was almost $11 million verdict.
But it had to last this person who already went through 7-8 years of going to get to this point. It has to last them the rest of their life. Now,
that's right.
You would think that it would, but I can imagine there were a lot of hurt feelings when that initially happened. So now it's got to go to court. Does the civil take longer than the criminal side?
Yes. In the criminal side, Michael, they have what's called speedy trial rights. So they don't let you, as a defendant, languish in jail forever without getting your right to trial by jury. The Seventh Amendment requires that you be given the right to a trial. In the criminal case, they have speedy trial statutes say can't let you languish in jail. They've got to have you in front of a jury or a judge within a certain period of time, or you've got to be released. So prosecutors are very busy. Courts, for the most part, in Franklin County and across the country, are busy the majority of time on criminal cases. Most of the courts in Franklin County, the common pleas courts, where we bring these civil actions, get pushed out to a long period of time because criminal cases take precedence because of what's called speedy trial. So the defendants don't languish in jail. They get a trial. They go through the system. They're acquitted or they're found guilty, and you move on to the next one. Civil cases don't have a speedy trial statute, so they can languish. And a lot of times they take longer. To answer your question, civil cases normally take much longer.
Then I'm going to say what I think other people are thinking. That seems unfair. I don't have a criminal issue, but there's a civil issue, and I'm getting pushed down the line. As a common person, I would say, why don't I have my right to be heard and to have my case, deliberated on?
But absolutely, you do have that right. And the Seventh Amendment is an amendment that's overlooked by most people because it doesn't have that sexy appeal. The Seventh Amendment says your right to a jury trial is inviolate. That means you get a jury trial. Now, in a criminal side, you get it quicker than the civil side, but you will get yours if the court doesn't dismiss your case beforehand. So the reason it takes so long is the courts are backed up. Usually the government doesn't catch up to what the court's needs are until after it's almost too late. After the dockets are so high. A lot of cases, a lot of dockets of judges in Franklin County have 700 plus cases on their docket. That's criminal and civil. They're busy over there.
On the same day they could have
No.
civil?
It's all on their docket. In other
okay.
words, there's a judge is assigned. Each judge is assigned about 700, give or take, cases at any given time, and they have to work them through because criminal take precedence. They get first attention. Then they have weeks that are open for the civil cases, and then those cases get tried. Now, the Seventh Amendment's real important here, just for a minute. Everybody likes to talk about other amendments. First Amendment, freedom of speech. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Those are very sexy. They're very popular right now. But the Seventh Amendment to a jury trial, if it is ever taken away from us, we, as a consumer, as a group, as citizens, are screwed.
We'll have like the Salem witch trials all over again.
Then you've got what we got away from in England, that the king decided if you were guilty or innocent. The king decided whether or not you're going to be tried when they want to try you. This is an idea of tyranny that we got away from when we formed this government, when we formed this country. We want our peers to decide on factual issues.
Well, that seems very important. Why is the 7th? I know we can't dispute it because we weren't in the room, but that seems like a really important thing, and it's 7th. And no one does. You're right. I've never heard him go, you know what, I'm going to use my 7th Amendment right here. I mean, I've heard you discuss it, but it seems like it'd be, 3 or 4.
I think people don't know about it, and I think people don't understand it until it happens to them. But the reason it's 7th, I can't tell you why, but it's in the top 10, so it's really important. I mean, they could have put it first, they could have put it 7th, they could have put it 2nd, regardless, but being at 7 is a big, big, big deal.
Well, I would think that would go hand in hand with the right to bear arms, especially now, because, if I'm brandishing a firearm, I'm going to need at some point some lawyer to either back me up or to protect me from some decision I made.
Well, they're all important, Michael. They're all important. You can't.
I'm not bashing.
Just because one says First Amendment, or one says Second Amendment, doesn't make the Second Amendment less important than the first.
Right.
They're all important, and the Seventh Amendment is as important as all of them. The good thing about the Seventh Amendment is you and me, guys on the street, get to have people like us make decisions about our cases, and not some judge who's got an agenda. Not some politician who wants it to go one way or another. We get people that are just like us, that have everyday experiences, get to determine whether a person violated the rule of law or they didn't. And if we are a society that follows the rule of law, then we're all better off, because then we're all safer. and we're all protected, and less people do it because they're deterred from doing that violation, breaking that law, because there's consequences to pay. And if there's no consequences to pay, then we would become lawless. And then people would do whatever they wanted to each other. And it turned into, riots, chaos, revolution, things of that nature.
When you see, there are a lot of protest organizations going on, have been going on in the last 2 years, those people seem to know their rights when it comes to that. They're not committing criminal acts, the majority of them, but are those protected in these civil rights that you have?
What specifically?
Well, when you have somebody that say when they're protesting and they're not damaging property, they're just standing in front of a building. Like I think it was earlier this week, they were standing in front of Trump Tower. If they're just standing there and they're not supposed to be, you don't have a permit, you still have your rights. I mean, all you're doing is really trespassing, but you can still be heard because it's the Seventh Amendment.
Well, no, it's not the Seventh Amendment. It's not the Seventh. Now we're talking about freedom of speech, and where can you say it, and what can you say? Well, if we're going to strictly interpret the First Amendment, you should be able to say anything you want to me or anyone else.
I agree.
And it should be protected. I may not agree with one thing you say, but there's a famous quote, I may not agree, but I'll defend to my death your right to say it. That's sort of the basic backbone of freedom of speech. In your example, well, there may be some local ordinance in New York City that says you can't picket, or you can't demonstrate, or you can't have a sign on a public sidewalk without a permit. It may say that. That doesn't mean you don't have the right to free speech, but they may give you a ticket for improper assembly, some kind of small local ordinance that they could ticket you for, and then you could fight that if you wanted to. You could hire a lawyer and say, well, that's a violation of my First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. So that statute should be found unconstitutional because my constitutional rights allow me to say what I want, when I want to say it, and how I want to say it. That's sort of the juxtaposition. That's the comparison between those who want to say what they want to say, where they want to say it, and how they want to say it, versus a local community trying to make sure there's at least some semblance of civility amongst all of its citizens. So it's a weighing act. It's a constant balancing act between your particular and specific individual rights and the community and what they think is necessary to make sure we're all safe.
When you watch the news, because there's so many, I'm watching it totally different because of our experience when we're doing the show and we're talking to each other. The entire time when I see people there was the Pride Parade last year where the Black Lives Matter people, it wasn't a group, it was like 4 or 5, happened to get on the parade path. When I'm watching, the first thing I'm thinking is, oh, I hope they have a lawyer because they're interrupting somebody has a permit to do this. I'm not looking at it, what the protest is about. I'm just thinking, please don't get beat up, please don't get hurt, and please don't have not be prepared and get a lawyer. When you see that, do you look at it and go, they're expressing their freedom of speech, or do you say, here's the laws they're violating and they need to be protected from themselves? Well,
the law, unfortunately, Michael, is not as black and white as everybody wants it to appear. They just think it's this way or it's this way, and there's no way. In the example I gave you, people protesting in New York City, you have a right to your speech. That's number 1 on the amendments list. The city has a counterbalancing right to maybe limit when you can say it, how you can say it, just to protect the city. So with those two balancing acts, when I see an instance like that, I go, well, we have some issue here, and it's something that the court will have to decide. And it's hard to do it from the news because you don't get the true story, right, and you don't get the full story. So what you're getting is a picture or a video, in your instance, saying, it looks like on one end, you should have freedom of speech and no one should curtail that. On the other end, you got someone that looks like they're trying to commit a violent act or incite a violent act. And that's where it gets real gray.
Well, where's the level of criminal and civil cross? Is it criminal that I'm interrupting an assembly that somebody has a permit to do? I'm stopping that? Or is criminal strictly, I stole something, I killed someone?
No, criminal comes into play there too, depending on if there's a statute or local ordinance that's written regarding that behavior. It depends on the behavior. In the example I gave before, that you're the drunk driver and you run a stop sign, you're going to get both. You're going to be in the criminal sector, you're going to go through the criminal process, and you're going to go through the civil process.
So they're two different.
They are different. Sometimes they overlap for the same facts.
Okay.
So it can. In the parade issue that you're referring to, there could be a criminal violation. It depends on what the actual facts are. And there could be civil. Maybe there's a claim their rights were violated some way. A constitutional right would be violated. That would be a civil part.
I just see so many more incidents that things are getting escalated. And again, I don't mean to make light of it. I'm looking at them going, oh, if they wouldn't have done this thing, because now it's getting to this level, to this level, to this level. And then it's not the person. It used to be 20 years ago, somebody was involved in an incident, they would be on TV. It's a lawyer. There's a lawyer that's out there that's like, I'm going to get ahead of this. And they're getting the press for it. And I just think this is an amazing time to go through this, because it seems like there's more lawyers than there are incidents, but you're telling me each judge can have 700 cases and the docket's full.
It can be, but without getting into that, let's get back to actually the...
Yeah, I'm sorry, I took us down a path,
No,
but
that's
I wanted
fine.
to hear your actual opinion on that, because...
Well, on a freedom of speech issue, you've got overlapping concerns and overlapping rights that are created by the government. The Constitution is our backbone. You start there. And then any laws that are made that are in violation of that Constitution, you will say, as a person, that's unconstitutional. Let's say, for instance, there is a protest somewhere. Let's make it up. In downtown Columbus on the State House, and you got your permit, if you needed a permit, and you're out in front of the State House, and you got signs, and there's something you protest. Well, on most instances, you're allowed to do that. And if your politician comes out and you give them a load of grief about a bill they're trying to pass or rights they think the protester thinks is being taken away from them, you have a right to do that. Now, the problem is, as we can see it around us all the time, you got different factions who disagree about a particular right. And even though they both can say what they want, it normally doesn't just remain peaceful. And what happens is it gets escalated, and someone's saying something to someone, and someone's not talking about the issues anymore. Someone's getting personally confronted or accosted, verbally accosted. When someone else takes it personally, and next thing you know, there's violence. Now we have a criminal statute. Now we have assault. Now we have civil disobedience. So you're dealing with the municipality and the codes it's got, that you're not allowed to punch somebody because you don't like what they had to say. You may disagree with them, but it didn't give you a right to punch them. Well, in this particular instance, two peaceful, although opposite, protests are going on. All of a sudden it escalates to violence. Well, at the time then it escalates to violence, you got a problem. And now you got the criminal aspect, and most likely you got the civil aspect.
But the civil can also cover me throwing a punch at you.
Yes.
That's not the criminal part. When it gets escalated even further, it can become criminal as well.
Oh, absolutely. If you punch me, I can call the police. They'll come and most likely arrest you for assault if it was unprovoked or you weren't defending yourself.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, probably my fault. So you get charged, and then I sue you for the damages. You broke my jaw. You're a big man. You hit me pretty hard. Well, I got a broken jaw. I got medical records and bills. You owe me for that.
Okay, let's break here because I see you're getting emotional. We want to take a break here and come back and get right back on this.
Can't wait.
Yeah, you're listening to Get Justice with Scott Elliot Smith. That's really good. So, we got about, what, Jimmy, 7?
Yeah,
About 7
approximately.
minutes.
Okay, now
7.
you want to dovetail. Let's take it down a notch, Scott, and let's dovetail into a couple issues I want to talk about in the civil justice system. Distracted driving, if that's one of the things you want to talk about.
I really like where we're going right now because I like
This
when we
we
just
can
free-roll.
talk about this all day.
I know, but see, I don't want to get it. Let's touch on it just for the 7 minutes. But that can be civil.
That can be an
and
example
criminal.
on me talking about the civil justice
Right.
system.
Okay, we'll just do that.
I'll bring us back in and recenter us. We're talking about the civil justice system. I want to talk a little bit about jury trials a little bit more, why it's important, and you can bring me up an example of, well, what about a jury trial on distracted driving?
I really would love for us to break down the O.J. Simpson thing, just because people were so.
Which one? What thing?
The
Talk about
original
infidels.
one. The original.
The crime,
Because
the murders.
yeah, alleged.
Okay, that's probably a different
Not
story,
today.
but we can touch on it.
I just
No, that's a good example. That's a good example. All
Because
right.
everyone knows that. That's one of the
I'm gonna-
biggest trials
Yeah.
that'll last like 50
I'm
years.
not going distracted driving. I want to do that.
Okay,
Ready?
Yep.
Yeah, here we go.
welcome back to Get Justice with Scott Elliott Smith and Michael Morris. Michael, before our break, we were talking about the civil justice system.
Yeah, we were getting quite heated.
Well, we're intense. We're passionate about what we do.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. I'm glad you said passionate about what you do, because what I want to talk about is we discuss civil and criminal, and I got a perfect small case example. You might have heard of it, the O.J. Simpson trial. Okay, have you heard of this?
I heard about it.
Okay, as a
yes.
lawyer, you've heard of this.
You're talking about the criminal trial.
Well, I am talking about the criminal trial. However, there were two. You gave the example that one could become another. They went out of order. They went criminal first, then went civil. So, how does that work? Because we got to watch that play out on TV, and it looked really bad.
Which part are you talking about?
The part of the how
criminal
the courts, the criminal. Let's just focus on criminal.
Okay.
Because we didn't see the civil. I'm sure that wasn't as exciting. But when you're watching this on TV, you're thinking, boy, the system is messed up, right?
Well, this is America's first look into the justice system on a regular, every day on TV basis.
It was Big Brother before Big Brother.
It is big, and people watched it and they judged. The reason lawyers do what they do is because we go to law school and we learn what the law is, and we learn what procedure is, and we learn what evidence is, and you've got to follow those rules. So again, we have an orderly system, so everybody gets a fair shake, and these rules are in place for that. Now, we may not have agreed with what happened to O.J. Simpson, the criminal trial, that he was acquitted. We may agree that he should have been acquitted. A lot of people shake their head because the little that they know, they think he should have been found guilty. Well, some people say, no, he shouldn't have. As a lawyer's perspective, I didn't watch every day because I worked every day, but I can tell you that justice system worked. It didn't work flawlessly, but it worked as it was designed to work. The lawyers from the prosecution, the state, brought their case. They had their witnesses. They put on their experts. And then the defense had their turn. And they put on their witnesses and their experts after cross-examining the prosecutor's witnesses. And then after the defense put their witnesses on, the prosecution gets to cross-examine them. And the jury gets to hear everything the law or the judge allows to be in. So with that in mind, the jury made a decision. Now, was it the right decision or the wrong decision? It's irrelevant. That is our system. It's only irrelevant to the fact of the system worked. This is what we want. I can tell you I've tried over 80 jury trials to verdict, Michael. I've only lost 3, but I will tell you this. On almost all of them, the jury does the right thing. And we're talking about people off the street. We're not talking about people that are educated in the law or educated in anything. You don't have to be educated in anything. When you hear the facts, you know what the facts are, and the judge will tell you what the law is and says, if you ran that stop sign and you're drunk and you hurt somebody, the jury's got to decide that you were at fault, that you caused injury, what the damages were, and this is what you were to pay. That's how the system should work. And that's what, unfortunately, some politicians are trying to avoid, or trying to get a limited or diluted Seventh Amendment. We don't want that ever.
What do you mean by that, though? I mean,
well, for
without
instance,
naming people, I'm just saying, what does diluting it mean? What would that be?
Well, one instance is class actions. There's a company out there that may mess over everybody for $20. A bank, for instance, overcharges everybody $20. It's not very much money, but $20 times 2 million is a lot of money. Well, most people won't fight it and go, it's not big enough to fight. If you want to fight it, you can get a lawyer and they can form a class action to represent everybody and make that bank pay. Well, what big banks and big insurance companies are trying to do is take away the right to a jury trial on that class action. What they want to do is limit you to arbitration. And that's not a jury anymore. That's all their buddies on the panel who rule most likely in a way that they want them to rule.
Because they have influence, or someone is influencing their decision.
Well, there's a lot of
Allegedly.
that going on. There's a lot of it
Allegedly.
going on without naming specifics. So what we want to do is, no. Our Seventh Amendment says we're not limited to arbitration. We are entitled to a jury trial. And that's one reason we left England. We wanted our peers to make these decisions, not the corporations. And that's what's happening.
So, okay, if we go down that road, what's the likelihood that we can lose those rights? Or it can be diluted?
If everybody sits on their hands and doesn't give a voice to the people that represent them, we can lose those rights. If we continue to elect people who are in favor of that process, taking away our Seventh Amendment, taking away our First Amendment, taking away our Second Amendment, if you are in favor of that person, there's a good chance those rights are taken away because they'll change the law. They change the law, and it's not good. And you can't change the Constitution unless you file an amendment.
I like what we did today because it was a very passionate discussion about this, and I feel like I kind of took you down a different road with that OJ thing. But I think the best part about this was you touched on that was a criminal act, and at least you got it to be heard. And a decision was made. So you said that's a
Decision was
correct
made. Well, that's the process
The
work.
process, not the judgment,
Correct.
right? But if you could leave people, when you're talking about the Seventh Amendment and the right to this, in 60 seconds, what do you want to leave people with?
As a citizen, we have the right to vote, and we have a right to sit on a jury. Those two rights are important. If you're called to sit on a jury, do not hesitate. You're doing it for everybody. You're doing it for yourself and the community. This is what we built our government on. Take interest. Be involved. You don't want corporations and big businesses to run your life. You want to have a say-so, and that allows you to do it.
Perfect. Well, that does it for today on Get Justice with Scott Elliot Smith. Thanks, Scott, once again.
Thanks, Michael. See you next week.
I feel like we should do that more often. Instead
What?
of
Scream and yell?
people like that.